For 3 years, I was the kept man of the Blackwood family, the whole city's favorite punchline. I was the gold digger who'd hit the jackpot. I'd made a promise, and for that, I endured the endless contempt and mockery. I didn't care. I'd even drafted the divorce papers for her. All I had to do was wait for her long-lost childhood sweetheart to return from his triumphant conquest of Wall Street, and I could walk away with a fat severance check. My mission complete. Finally, at her birthday party, he came back. He shoved a check in my face and pointed a finger at my nose, his voice dripping with venom. A pathetic, tail-wagging stray like he doesn't get to tarnish my star. I was just about to play my part in Gravel, but my wife, the billionaire CEO, snatched a bottle from the pinnacle of the champagne tower and smashed it over his head. Wine and blood streamed down his face. She stepped over the shattered glass, her blood-stained fingertips tilting my chin up. Her voice was an impossible mix of ice and devotion. Darling, his hands are his life. You call the annual gala at the Blackwood estate. The crystal chandeliers were blinding. Liam sat at the far end of the long dining table, quietly working on his steak, a ghost at the feast. Liam, Uncle Wallace, seated near the head of the table, set down his silverware with a clatter. He dabbed at his greasy lips with a napkin, his gaze drifting over to Liam. Don't just sit there stuffing your face. Go check on Maria in the kitchen. See if she needs a hand. You're a man, for God's sake. You can't just freeload off the Blackwoods for 3 years. A few stifled snickers echoed across the table. Every eye, some mocking, some disdainful, zeroed in on Liam. Liam didn't stop chewing. He calmly swallowed the bite of food before finally looking up. His face was a blank mask. He was used to this. He even nodded. Of course, Uncle Wallace. He placed his knife and fork on his plate, pushed back his chair, and actually started to get up. The moment he was on his feet, a voice as cold and clear as a mountain spring flowed from the head of the table. He's with me. Who gave you permission to order him around? The voice wasn't loud, but it shattered the fragile, hypocritical harmony of the dining room. The room fell dead silent. Everyone turned to the speaker. The true power in the Blackwood family, Stella Blackwood. She didn't even glance at Wallace. She just tapped a long fingernail on the polished mahogany. Her almond-shaped eyes, usually so distant, were fixed on Liam. Wallace's face flushed, then paled. He awkwardly took a gulp of wine and said no more. Stella, you're so protective of him, chimed in Stella's cousin, Chloe, her voice a saccharine drawl laced with passive aggression. Anyone would think you were actually in love with him. Stella finally lifted her gaze, fixing Chloe with a look so cold it could freeze fire. She didn't say a word, but the crushing weight of her stare made Chloe snap her mouth shut. Just then, the heavy carved wooden doors of the hall swung open. A man in a bespoke suit radiating an aura of success strode in. In his hands, he held an enormous bouquet of rare, deep blue roses, the color of a starry night sky. It's Lucas Vance. He's back from New York. The mood at the table instantly shifted. The sullen atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a buzz of excitement. Family members shot to their feet, their faces plastered with eager smiles, tripping over themselves to greet the newcomer. Liam, who had just stood up, was jostled aside, forgotten like a piece of trash. The contrast between him and the celebrated Lucas Vance couldn't have been starker. Lucas moved through the fawning crowd and walked straight to Stella. He presented the bouquet of starlight roses, his eyes full of deep, focused emotion. Stella, I'm back. His voice was a smooth, magnetic baritone. Then his gaze, sharp with appraisal and contempt, finally landed on Liam, standing beside her. We don't need impurities like this between us. The disdain in Lucas's eyes was almost tangible. He pulled a checkbook from his suit pocket with a flick of his wrist. The slip of paper fluttered through the air, and, with all the weight of a profound insult, slapped against Liam's face. $10 million for you to get the hell out of the Blackwood family and stop dirtying Stella's sight. The check slid down Liam's cheek and landed on the plush carpet at his feet. A worthless fallen leaf. Every eye in the room swiveled to Stella, their expressions a mix of anticipation and righteous expectation. Stella's sister-in-law Megan couldn't hide the smirk on her face, eager to see how this drama would play out. $10 million was a king's ransom for a useless trophy husband. It was the lottery ticket of a lifetime. No one thought Liam would refuse. Liam kept his head down, his long bangs obscuring his eyes, hiding the flash of icy, biting mockery within them. He had to see the act through to the end. He'd already written the script in his head. He would bend down, his hands trembling with a mixture of humiliation and greed, and pick up the check. Then, amidst the roaring laughter, he would scurry away. He was just about to bend his knees to perform this final scene. Crack! The sound wasn't a glass falling, but the sickening thud of a bottle meeting a skull. Time seemed to freeze. Everyone whipped their heads toward the sound. Stella still held the neck of the top bottle from the champagne tower. The body of the bottle had shattered, and golden liquid mixed with a shocking bright red was pouring down Lucas Vance's stunned face. Lucas's eyes were wide. He swayed for a moment before falling backward like a plank, hitting the floor with a heavy, sickening thud. The room was silent for a full second before erupting in screams. Stella, her face a mask of cold fury, tossed the broken bottleneck aside. It shattered with a sharp tinkle. Wearing 4-inch stilettos, she walked step by steady step across the debris-strewn floor toward the frozen Liam. The crunch of her heels on the broken glass was like the beat of a death drum, each step landing on the hearts of the onlookers. She stopped in front of him, her long, slender fingers, still slick with another man's blood, gently hooked under Liam's chin, forcing him to look up. Her eyes were glacial, but her voice held a thrilling, possessive warmth. "Darling." His hands were his life. "Your call." Liam looked up and met her gaze, an abyss of dark resolve. There wasn't a hint of a joke in her eyes, only pure, unchallengeable authority. This woman, for him, her useless husband in name only, had just cracked open the skull of her returning hero in front of the city's elite. A wave of heat, something he hadn't felt in years, crashed against the walls of his frozen heart, stunning him for a moment. For the first time, he didn't want to act anymore. Liam reached out gently, taking her hand, the one that was still trembling slightly, still stained with blood. He uncurled her fingers one by one and enveloped them in his own palm. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the dead silent hall. "Don't get your hands dirty." He paused, then pulled her hand and turned to leave. "Let's go home." Under the terrified, horrified, and utterly baffled gazes of everyone present, Liam led Stella out of the Blackwood estate, closing the door on the chaos and shock he left in his wake. Back at the villa, the heavy carved wooden door shut out the world. Stella tossed her car keys onto the console table in the entryway with a sharp clink. She shrugged off her blood-splattered evening jacket, revealing arms still flecked with champagne. She radiated a dangerous, untouchable aura. She strode over to Liam. Those almond eyes, which could make business rivals tremble, were now scanning him up and down, laced with a panic she herself didn't recognize. "Come here. Sit down." Her voice was still cold, but it wasn't a command. It was a clumsy attempt at care. Liam obediently sat on the sofa and watched her turn to get the first aid kit. This woman, who a moment ago was a queen, smashing champagne towers and walking on broken glass, was now flustered by a tiny scratch on his face. Stella opened the kit, pulling out cotton swabs and antiseptic. Her fingers, long and beautiful, were unsteady. "This might sting a little. Try to bear it," she murmured, leaning in to carefully dab at the red line on his cheek, left by the edge of the check. The cool stinging of the antiseptic was nothing compared to the searing heat of her fingertips. Liam sat perfectly still, letting her fuss over him. For 3 years, he had perfected the mask of a plant, useless man. But never, not once, had he felt his heart being held and gently kneaded by a warm hand like this. "I'm sorry," Stella said, her voice soft with regret. "You were humiliated today because of me." Liam looked up, his eyes meeting hers, which were filled with genuine pain and apology. He had seen countless pairs of eyes filled with awe, fear, greed, but never a pair that was so purely, simply indignant on his behalf. "I'm fine," he said, his voice a little strained. Stella's hands stilled. She took a breath and explained. "Lucas Vance? I knew him before I went to college. That's it. 3 years ago, my family tried to force me into a business merger through marriage. I needed a shield." She looked directly at Liam, her gaze unflinching. "Instead of choosing some ambitious wolf, I decided to find the safest option." The safest option? Liam mulled over those words, almost laughing out loud. Him, Hades, the king of the underworld, a bringer of death and destruction, a name that made hardened criminals tremble. And to her, he was the safest, most harmless choice. The irony was suffocating, but he didn't expose the lie. He just played along, letting a look of dawning comprehension mixed with self-deprecation cross his face. "So, I was the tool you chose, the one who would cause the least amount of trouble." The word tool made her flinch. Seeing his feigned casualness made her heart ache even more. She suddenly dropped the cotton swab and, without warning, wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight. Liam's body went rigid. The embrace wasn't sexual. It was powerful, a declaration of ownership. "Liam, it doesn't matter how we started." Stella buried her face in his shoulder, her voice muffled, but every word clear. "Now you're my husband. Anyone who touches you, I will destroy." Her warm breath ghosted over his ear. And in that moment, the rigid wall Liam had built around himself began to crack. He slowly raised a hand, hesitated for a fraction of a second, and then let it rest gently on her back. For the first time, his plan for revenge had an uncontrollable variable. Meanwhile, in a city's best private hospital, a porcelain mug was hurled against the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Lucas Vance, his head wrapped in thick gauze, his handsome face twisted with fury, roared, "Stella Blackwood, you bitch. And that worthless piece of trash? I'll make you pay 100 times over." He gasped for breath, snatched his phone, and dialed an encrypted number. The call connected. The other end was silent, waiting. Lucas lowered his voice, each word laced with poison. "It's me. I need someone to disappear from this world permanently." Lucas's revenge was swift and brutal. The next morning, as soon as the stock market opened, Blackwood Industries' stock price nosedived without warning. a sickening green line that seared the eyes of every shareholder. Hostile short sellers swarmed in like sharks that had scented blood. The company was thrown into chaos, and negative rumors spread like wildfire. Stella's phone was blowing up. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling window in a sharp power suit, her face so cold it could cause frostbite. She barked orders into the phone at her board members. Stabilize the price at any cost and find out whose accounts this money is flowing from. Hanging up, she glanced at Liam, who was sitting quietly on the sofa watching TV. The ice in her features melted slightly. I have to go out. An emergency at the office. She walked over to him, her voice softening unconsciously. Lock the door when I'm gone. Don't want her off. Okay. Liam looked up, his face a mask of perfect concern. Stella, is it serious? Don't work yourself too hard. It's nothing, just a small fire to put out. Stella ruffled his hair. I'll be back soon. Watching her hurry away, the docile expression on Liam's face slowly faded, leaving behind a chilling, bottomless calm. He picked up his phone. A new message glowed on the screen. Lucas Vance has made his move. Night fell. The villa was silent. Suddenly, a faint click came from the front door lock. Several shadowy figures slipped inside, their movements practiced and silent. The leader was a bald man with a brutish, muscular build. He scanned the luxurious villa with contempt, his eyes finally settling on the seemingly frail figure on the sofa. Liam seemed to startle, jumping to his feet and staring at them with wide, panicked eyes. Who are you? What do you want? The bald man grinned, cracking his knuckles with a sound like popping corn. Who we are doesn't matter. What matters is that someone paid a lot of money for us to take both your legs and one of your arms. He advanced, his eyes mocking. You're the Blackwood's kept man, right? In your next life, you should be more careful about who you piss off. Liam stumbled backward until his back hit a cold wall. He was trapped. Fear was etched on his face, his body trembling. No, please. You want money? My wife has money. I can give you her credit cards. The thugs erupted in laughter, their scorn echoing in the cavernous room. To them, this man was nothing but a coward who had wet his pants in fear. The bald man raised the steel pipe in his hand, aiming for Liam's knee, and swung down without mercy. You can beg in hell. The pipe whistled through the air. In the instant before it made contact, the terror in Liam's eyes vanished, replaced by a deadly stillness. He moved. His body shifted at an impossible angle. The pipe scraped against his pant leg and slammed into the wall, sending sparks flying. The bald man froze, stunned. Before he could react, a hand had clamped around his wrist like a vice. Crack, a clean, sharp snap of bone. The thug's scream died in his throat. Liam had already snatched the pipe from his hand and, in a fluid motion, swung it around, striking another thug squarely on the shin. Another sickening crack. The entire sequence was seamless, executed with terrifying speed. The smiles on the remaining thugs' faces froze, replaced by raw, unadulterated terror. Was this the powerless, useless husband from the rumors? This was a goddamn killing machine. Liam gave them no time to think. He moved through them like a phantom. Every strike was met with a grunt and the thud of a body hitting the floor. His movements were clean and efficient, targeting joints and vital points with brutal precision. In less than 10 seconds, no one was left standing but Liam. He walked over to the bald man, who was on the floor cradling his grotesquely twisted wrist and moaning in agony. Liam nudged the man's face with the toe of his shoe, then slowly crouched down. He deliberately removed the pair of non-prescription glasses he had worn as a disguise for 3 years. Behind the lenses, what kind of eyes were revealed? They were cold, indifferent, possessing an authority that could crush souls. His voice was a soft whisper, but it landed on the thug's heart like a sledgehammer. Go back and tell Lucas Vance, who gave him the balls to touch what belongs to Hades. The smell of blood still hung in the air. Liam, his face devoid of expression, dialed an encrypted number. As soon as the call connected, he said 2 words, clean up. No other explanation was needed. The person on the other end, clearly accustomed to his commands, replied with a respectful affirmative and hung up. Less than 10 minutes later, several shadows slipped into the villa like ghosts. The man in the lead wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and had the demeanor of a scholar. He was the judge, one of Liam's 4 chief lieutenants. Hades. The judge knelt on one knee, his voice betraying no emotion. Liam glanced at the bodies littering the floor and grunted in acknowledgement. The judge immediately rose and gestured to his men. They began to clean the scene with silent, terrifying efficiency, wiping away blood, disposing of the bodies and repairing the broken lock. Within minutes, the room was pristine, as if the brutal fight had never happened. Did you trace it? Liam asked, walking to the window and staring out into the deep night. It was a crew of mercenaries hired by Lucas Vance on the dark web, the judge reported, handing him a tablet displaying the money trail. But when we tracked the source of the funds, we found traces of the Spectre Syndicate. The Spectre Syndicate? Liam's pupils contracted. The very air around him seemed to drop a few degrees. 3 years ago, it was this organization that had killed his best friend. His marriage into the Blackwood family, his years of humiliation, it was all for this one lead. Just then, his personal phone rang. The screen lit up with the caller ID. My queen. Liam took a deep breath. The soul-freezing killing intent vanished in an instant, replaced by a perfectly calibrated expression of weakness and panic. He cleared his throat and answered, his voice trembling with a tearful quaver. Stella. Stella's voice came through the line, tired but still cool. Liam, what's wrong? I just got out of a meeting. Stella, I'm so scared. Liam's acting was worthy of an Oscar. There was a huge clap of thunder just now. It was so loud, the windows were shaking. I'm all alone here. I'm terrified. There was a 2-second pause on the other end, followed by a soft, irrepressible chuckle laced with fondness and exasperation. You idiot, that wasn't thunder. It's a perfectly clear night in the city. Liam feigned confusion, then doubled down on his nonsensical complaint. I don't care. It was a really loud noise, even scarier than thunder. When are you coming home? All right, don't be scared. I'll be home as soon as I wrap one last thing up. Stella's voice was so gentle, it was practically liquid. Be a good boy and wait for me. Hanging up, the panicked expression on Liam's face vanished, replaced by an unnerving placid coldness. The judge stood nearby, his eyes fixed on the floor, long accustomed to his boss's seamless transformations. That dog Lucas has a bigger bite than I thought, Liam mused, toying with his phone, his eyes dark and thoughtful. Since he's so eager to stick his neck out, it would be rude not to fit him for a collar. He looked at the judge. I want a full report on all of Lucas Vance's recent business dealings and any possible connections he has to the Spectre Syndicate. I want it on my desk by morning. Yes, Hades. The judge took his leave, his team melting away as silently as they had arrived. Half an hour later, Stella walked in the door. She found Liam curled up in the corner of the sofa, clutching a throw pillow, looking for all the world like a traumatized kitten. Her heart softened. She hurried over, kicked off her heels, and pulled him into a tight embrace. It's okay, I'm back. You're safe now. She patted his back gently, as if soothing a frightened animal. Liam buried his head in the crook of her neck, inhaling her faint, familiar scent, feeling the warmth and softness that belonged only to her. His voice was muffled. Stella, if you hadn't come back, I think I would have died of fright. His complete dependence melted her heart. She let out a long sigh of relief, murmuring soft words of comfort. She didn't see the cold, calculating smile that touched the lips of the man she held so tightly in her arms. Lucas Vance. The Spectre Syndicate. The top-floor office of Blackwood Industries was brightly lit, but the atmosphere was glacial. Outside the panoramic windows, the city glittered, but Stella was in no mood to admire the view. Spread across her desk were files for the Starfall project, an overseas venture she had spent years building, only to have the rug pulled out from under her. Lucas Vance, backed by a mysterious overseas capital firm, had struck like a viper, sinking his fangs directly into the project's most vulnerable point. The entire initiative had ground to a halt. The company's stock was in freefall, and the board was in a panic. Ms. Blackwood, Mr. Klein in Europe has refused all our attempts at communication, her assistant said, her voice strained with defeat. Stella rubbed her temples and waved a dismissive hand, sending the assistant out. Alone, in the vast office, she leaned back in her chair, feeling a profound sense of failure for the first time. This wasn't just business competition. Her opponent's tactics were vicious, ruthless, designed to do nothing less than burn the Blackwood Empire to the ground. It was late when she returned to the villa. A single warm sconce was lit in the living room. On the dining table, several artfully arranged dishes were still steaming. Liam emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron. Have some soup first. You've been working all day. Stella had no appetite, but looking at the gentle profile of her husband, she picked up the spoon. I saw in the financial news today that this Klein guy in Europe is a real cinephile, Liam said seemingly at random as he tidied up the kitchen counter. They said he's obsessed with ancient Chinese art, especially some painting called Autumn Journey, Over the Mountains. Stella's hand paused, the spoon hovering over the soup. Of course, she knew to land his project. She'd researched Klein down to his great-grandparents. He was indeed obsessed with the painting and had even publicly stated he'd trade half his fortune for it. The problem was the genuine scroll by the Yuan dynasty master Wang Min had vanished over a century ago. You couldn't even find a decent replica on the market. It was a dead end. She put down the spoon, exhausted. Never mind a real thing. You can't even find a photograph of it anymore. Really? Liam dried his hands, sat down across from her, and scratched his head, affecting a guileless expression. That's a shame. A couple of days ago, I was passing by that weekend flea market in Brooklyn, and I think I saw one that looked pretty similar on some guy's tarp. The painting was actually not bad. Stella looked up, her gaze sharp and appraising. A flea market? A tarp? It sounded like a ridiculous fantasy, but looking at Liam's harmless, innocent face, she dismissed her suspicions. This man's greatest talent, aside from cooking and keeping her bed warm, was probably just dumb luck. Maybe we could go take a look tomorrow, Liam asked tentatively. Even if it's a fake, we could hang it on the wall. Or, you could use it to smack Lucas Vance in the face. Might make you feel better. The last part made Stella crack a smile, the first in a long, tense evening. The knot in her shoulders loosened slightly. On a whim, she nodded. Fine, it was a long shot, but at this point, I have nothing to lose. The next day, for the first time in years, Stella swapped her designer suit for casual jeans and a sweater and followed Liam into the chaotic, dusty flea market. The air, thick with the smell of old wood and earth, and the cacophony of vendors hawking their wares, made her, a woman accustomed to the world's most exclusive venues, deeply uncomfortable. Liam, however, was in his element. He expertly navigated the crowded aisles, leading her to a secluded corner and pointing to a stall overflowing with junk. Stella, look, is that it? The stall owner, a wiry old man, squinted at the impeccably dressed Stella, a shrewd glint in his eye. He presented the scroll. Well, now you two have a good eye. This here's a family heirloom. One price, $20,000. Stella almost laughed in his face. The scroll was so decrepit it was falling apart, and he wanted 20 grand. She was about to turn and walk away when Liam grabbed her arm. He turned a pitiful face to the vendor. Mister, do I look like someone who has 20 grand? My wife holds the purse strings. My wallet is emptier than my soul. I've only got $50 of pocket money I managed to hide from her. I just wanted to buy her a gift. Please do me a favor. Help a guy out. He delivered the lines with heartfelt emotion, the very picture of a poor browbeaten husband. The vendor chuckled, and seeing that Stella, though frowning, hadn't actually left, he waved a dismissive hand. Fine, fine. My lucky day, $50. Take it and get out of here. After paying, holding the tattered old scroll, Stella looked at Liam with an incredibly complex expression. Back at her office, she held no real hope, but out of habit, she had her assistant send the painting to a trusted art historian for appraisal. Half an hour later, her private line rang frantically. The usually calm expert on the other end was practically shouting, his voice trembling. Ms. Blackwood, the painting. Where's the painting? My God, it's the real thing. It's the Lost Wong neon scroll. It's the genuine autumn journey over the mountains. A bomb went off in Stella's head. She hung up the phone, her body frozen. Her gaze passed through the glass walls of her office and landed on the man sitting on her sofa, yawning out of boredom. With $50 at a flea market, he had bought back a lost masterpiece that could salvage a billion-dollar project. Stella's heart began to pound. A chill mixed with an indescribable shock shot up from her feet to the crown of her head. For the first time, she realized she might have never truly understood the man who had shared her bed for 3 years. To celebrate the project's recovery, Stella brought Liam to the city's most prestigious charity auction. The hall was a sea of couture gowns and custom tuxedos, a gathering of the city's most powerful figures. Stella was a vision in a black fishtail gown, an aloof, elegant queen of the night. Liam, beside her, in an ill-fitting rental tux, looked conspicuously out of place. Double quotes well, if it isn't Ms. Blackwood, to what do we owe the honor? A grating voice cut through the murmur. Lucas Vance approached, a drink in his hand. A faint scar on his forehead, a souvenir from her birthday, gave his handsome face a sinister edge. He didn't even look at Liam. His eyes were glued to Stella. Stella, you actually brought this dog out in public. Aren't you afraid he'll stink up the place? Tears formed in Stella's eyes. She was about to speak, but Liam gently tugged on her hand and took half a step back, lowering his head in a perfect imitation of a man who knew he'd done something wrong. He played the part of the useless, embarrassing accessory to a T. The sight of his meekness seemed to soothe Lucas's bruised ego. He let out a contemptuous snort and walked away. Stella looked at Liam's profile. His downcast eyes held no humiliation, only a calm so deep it was unnerving. Her heart fluttered. She said nothing more. The auction reached its climax. The final item was brought to the stage. And now for our final lot, the auctioneer announced, a specially encrypted hard drive. According to the donor, it contains the core trade secrets of a major multinational corporation. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Liam's pupils narrowed slightly. It's time. 50 million. Lucas was the first to raise his paddle, his expression smug and determined. He wanted to drive, but more than that, he wanted to crush Stella financially in front of everyone. A nondescript man, in a corner, raised his paddle. 60 million. Liam recognized him. A frontman for the Spectre Syndicate. The price skyrocketed, quickly surpassing 200 million. Stella frowned. This was far beyond the drive's commercial value. She touched Liam's arm, signaling him to drop out, just as Lucas shouted, 300 million, and shot them a provocative glare. Liam, who had been silent all night, slowly raised his paddle. 500 million. His two quiet words detonated in the hall like a bomb. Dead silence. Every eye was fixed on the man in the cheap tuxedo. Lucas's face turned the color of a plum. He stared at Liam, his voice a strangled whisper. Where the hell are you going to get that kind of money? Liam didn't even look at him. He just nodded at the auctioneer. 500 million. Do I hear any more? Going once. Going twice. 600 million. Lucas practically screamed, the veins in his neck bulging. Liam raised his paddle again, his expression as calm as a summer lake. $1 billion, Lucas choked, nearly collapsing. $1 billion for a damn hard drive. The man was insane. The auctioneer's gavel fell with a final resounding crack. Sold. Amidst a sea of shocked, probing, and utterly bewildered stares, Liam nonchalantly lowered his paddle. When they went to the back to finalize the transaction, Stella followed him in, closing the door and shutting out the world. She wasn't angry. She just watched him, her gaze so sharp it felt like it could dissect him. "Where did you get the money?" Liam turned around. The imperious aura he projected in the hall vanished instantly, replaced by a playful grin. He sidled up to Stella and with 2 fingers delicately pinched the fabric of her sleeve. "I used your credit card, darling." He blinked, his tone a mix of pleading and innocence. "You're not mad, are you?" Stella looked at him, at the cunning mischief he couldn't quite hide in his eyes. She knew no credit card had a billion-dollar limit. He wasn't going to explain. The cloud of suspicion in her mind grew thicker. How many secrets was this man hiding? But strangely, she didn't feel deceived. Instead, she felt a thrill, an unprecedented sense of excitement and security. Suddenly, Stella reached out, not to hit him, but to gently straighten his crooked tie, her fingertips deliberately brushing against his throat. Her voice was a low whisper. "We'll settle this at home." The Rolls-Royce glided silently through the night, heading back to their villa in the hills. The atmosphere in the car was strange. Liam toyed with the priceless hard drive, leaning back against the leather seat. "Darling," he teased, "aren't you afraid I'll take your card and run for the border?" Stella ignored his joke. She just watched him, her head tilted, studying him with an intensity Liam had never seen before. Her gaze was no longer cold or distant, but filled with a profound curiosity and an excitement she herself didn't fully grasp. This man was a treasure chest with a false bottom, revealing new depths just when she thought she had him figured out. Suddenly, the screech of tires tore through the night. Crunch! With a violent roar, the car jolted, the impact pinning them to their seats. A heavy-duty truck had T-boned their lead security vehicle, completely blocking the road. Simultaneously, several black SUVs materialized from the darkness, boxing them in. The doors flew open. A dozen black-clad stone-faced assassins poured out, moving with military precision, brandishing blades. Their target was clear. The hard drive, Spectre Syndicate. Liam's voice dropped, turning to ice. The eyes behind his glasses blazed with murderous intent. His fingers tensed, ready to shatter the window and spring into action. His people, his woman. He wouldn't let anyone lay a finger on them. But just as he was about to move, a cool hand pressed down firmly on his shoulder. "Stay in the car. Protect the drive." Liam froze, turning to look at her. The sophisticated SEO was gone. In her place was a predator, her face a mask of lethal focus. With a sharp click, she kicked off her 6-figure custom heels. Stepping barefoot onto the plush floor mat, she leaned down and retrieved a strangely shaped short blade from a compartment beneath her seat. The blade was long and narrow, a dark burnished gold that seemed to drink the faint light in the car. Liam's pupils constricted. He had never imagined that his seemingly untouchable Ice Queen wife was, in fact, a sleeping lioness. The car door opened. Stella moved like a black bolt of lightning, launching herself into the pack of assassins. Her movements were brutally efficient, fast, precise, lethal. There were no flashy moves, just a grim economy of motion. Every strike was aimed at a vital point. A sidestep to avoid a slash, a flick of the wrist, and her blade had silently opened a man's throat. Using his falling body as a shield, she lunged forward, driving the blade up under the ribs of another, straight into his heart. Blood splattered across her expensive gown. She was a dark, deadly flower, blooming in the night. Liam sat in the car, watching. He didn't move. He realized Stella didn't need his help, or maybe just a little. He saw an assassin creeping up behind her in her blind spot. Liam's finger tapped the button on the armrest. The window slid down without a sound. He flicked his wrist. A single coin shot through the air with a soft whistle, striking the assassin's knife hand with pinpoint accuracy. Clang! The man cried out in pain, his blade clattering to the pavement. That split-second delay was all Stella needed to spin around and deliver the killing blow. Separated by a battlefield of life and death, they moved with a strange, terrifying harmony. One in the light, a queen reaping a bloody harvest, the other in the shadows, a king controlling the board. A few minutes later, it was over. Stella stood amid the carnage, splattered with blood that wasn't hers. The tip of her golden blade, still dripping. She slowly turned through the shattered windshield, her gaze sharp as a hawk's, locked onto Liam inside the car. She walked toward him, her tall figure silhouetted by the headlights, exuding a suffocating pressure. She didn't get in. She stood outside the door, and with eyes that had seen life and death, she asked, her words slow and deliberate. "Liam, who the hell are you?" Liam was silent. He looked at the woman before him, her dress torn and stained, her hair a mess, yet more radiant than he had ever seen her. The fierce, desperate way she had thrown herself between him and danger was a sledgehammer that had shattered the final wall around his heart. The masquerade was over. He slowly raised a hand, his thumb gently wiping a smear of blood from her cheek. The gesture was so tender, it was completely at odds with the carnage around them. Hades. He spoke the single word, his voice quiet, but it landed in Stella's ears with the force of a thunderclap. Stella's eyes widened slightly. Liam's gaze was as deep as the night. He didn't look away. 3 years ago, my best friend was killed by the Spectre Syndicate. All the evidence pointed to an overseas channel with ties to the Blackwood family. Marrying you was the first step in my plan for revenge. He paused, looking into her eyes. His voice tinged with a complexity he hadn't known he possessed. I planned for everything. How to gain your trust. How to find the clues. How to make a clean exit. The only thing I didn't plan for was you. He didn't say the syrupy words of love. But that one admission, I didn't plan for you, was more real than any vow. Her silent gestures of care, over the years. The birthday dinners she pretended were an inconvenience. Her constant defense of him, they were all unforeseen variables in his cold, calculated world. They were the only light. The shock and anger he expected never appeared on Stella's face. She let out a long, slow breath, as if releasing a burden she'd carried for 3 years. The tension in her shoulders eased. A smile, bitter and relieved, touched her lips. So that's how it is. Her reaction left Liam speechless. Stella slid her blade back into its hidden compartment under the seat, her movements fluid and practiced. She turned back to him, her expression calm, and dropped a bombshell of her own. The Blackwoods aren't just business people. Not entirely. We are a family of guardians, a lineage that has existed for centuries, and the Spectre Syndicate is our sworn enemy. Liam's heart slammed against his ribs. Stella's fingertip gently tapped his chest. Her eyes held a cunning glint, like a fox that had finally watched its prey walk into a trap. So, you think you chose me? She laughed softly. 3 years ago, I needed a powerful ally to solidify my position in the family and a husband in name only to fend off parasites. Like Lucas Vance. And just then, my intelligence network flagged a man named Hades, who was seeking revenge against the Syndicate for his fallen brother and was planning to use the riskiest, most direct method to get close to the Blackwood family. By marrying into it, Liam's expression froze. He, Hades, the king of the underworld, master of 1,000 plots, had been playing out a script written by someone else from the very beginning. Stella watched his rare, stunned expression, and her mood lifted considerably. She couldn't resist a little teasing. So, you see, our marriage was never an accident. It was my premeditated design. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his skin. I was just waiting for you to finally tell me the truth. Liam was silent for a long moment, and then he started to laugh. A low chuckle that grew into a full-throated laugh, his chest shaking. He laughed at his own intricate scheming, only to end up as the catch of the day. He pulled the woman who was the source of all his love and frustration into his arms, holding her tight, his chin resting on the top of her head. His voice was a possessive, affectionate growl. Miss Blackwood, you play a long game. In his arms, Stella laughed too. She hugged him back, pressing her cheek against his solid chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. Takes one to know one, Mr. Hades. She paused, then tilted her head up, her eyes shining. So now, can you answer a question for me? What? The day I smashed that bottle over Lucas's head, was I cool? Liam looked at her face, begging for praise, and all the darkness and calculation in him melted into an exasperated smile. Cool, he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. My queen, you're magnificent. All the secrets and barriers between them dissolved in that moment, replaced by a profound trust and the promise of the war they would wage side by side. Stella rested in his arms. The Syndicate's director for Asia goes by the codename The Professor, she said softly. He's brilliant, to Ghost. I've been hunting him for years and have never gotten close. Liam's expression turned to steel. He tightened his hold on his wife, his voice low and resolute. That's because he hasn't met us. Liam heard about Lucas Vance's fate from the judge over an encrypted channel. The Syndicate disposed of him like garbage. He's not dead, but he'd be better off if he were. Last we heard, he's in a black market clinic in some failed state, being kept alive by an IV drip. The judge's tone was flat, as if discussing the weather. Liam just grunted in acknowledgement and ended the call. He didn't ask for more details. A clown like Lucas wasn't worth another thought. He and Stella had a much bigger target, the mysterious figure known as the Professor. The sublevel of the Blackwood Villa had been converted into a command center that would rival any military installation. Data streams and complex webs of connections flowed across a massive screen on the wall. The judge, the core of Hades's inner circle, and the Blackwood family's white-haired, old-guard butler stood side by side, exchanging intelligence with terrifying efficiency. The air crackled with a strange fusion of old-world duty and underworld ruthlessness. Stella walked in with 2 mugs of coffee, handing one to Liam, her fingertips brushing his. Let's be clear about the division of labor, she said, her eyes on the screen, her voice cool, but her eyes smiling. I'll take all their chips at the poker table. You'll be in charge of breaking the hands of anyone who tries to flip it. It was a crude, but perfectly apt description. Liam took a sip of the coffee. The warmth spread through him. Works for me, he nodded. but breaking hands is messy work. I prefer a more psychological approach." As he spoke, the judge pulled a file up on the main screen. "Boss, we've completely decrypted the hard drive from the auction. We found someone interesting. The syndicate's chief financial officer, codenamed the accountant. He's a coward. He's greedy. And we have a fatal piece of leverage on him." Stella raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what's that?" Liam chuckled, answering for him. "He has 3 secret, off-the-books accounts in Switzerland. Not even the syndicate knows about them. Now, what do you think the professor would do if he found out his money man had been skimming off the top?" Stella understood instantly, a cold smile gracing her lips. The defection was almost laughably easy when Liam, speaking as Hades, sent the accountant the transaction records for those 3 accounts. The man on the other end was silent for 3 seconds before completely breaking down. A net began to close around the professor. A week later, in international waters, a lavish business summit was underway on the Poseidon, a luxury cruise liner. The host was none other than the president of Blackwood Industries, Stella Blackwood. Dressed in a stunning crimson gown, she moved gracefully among the titans of industry, smiling and networking, the very picture of a global leader expanding her empire. No one knew she had a tiny earpiece nestled in her ear. 2 tangos, 3 o'clock. 1 at the elevator. Their pros. Liam's low, casual voice murmured. Stella, holding a glass of champagne, turned elegantly to toast a business partner in that direction, her peripheral vision taking everything in. "Received your message. Accountant seems a little nervous. He's about to shred his handkerchief. Natural, it's his first time betraying his boss. He's new at this." Liam's voice held a hint of a smile. "I'm in the central control room. The security up here is a joke." Stella took a sip of her drink, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't get cocky. Pride comes before a fall. Relax. My falls come with a parachute." Just then, the accountant shakily approached his target, a man in gold-rimmed glasses with a scholarly air. He was one of the professor's most trusted lieutenants. They exchanged a few quiet words. A briefcase was opened, revealing the core of the transaction. "Now," Stella ordered softly. In that same instant, the lights in the entire ballroom went out. Screams and gasps erupted from the guests. In the total darkness, the only sound was the silent approach of death. Less than 30 seconds later, the emergency lights flickered on. The ballroom was bathed in a dim glow, but the scene before them made everyone gasp. The 2 men who had been making the deal, along with a dozen of their bodyguards, were all lying silently on the floor, their life status unknown. The critical briefcase was gone. Stella stood in the crowd, a perfect expression of shock on her face, but her heart was as steady as a rock. A dark figure dropped silently from the shadows of a ventilation shaft, landing behind her without a sound. "Done," Liam's voice whispered in her ear. Stella didn't turn. "You have it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes." The accountant's intel was good. "This is the complete architectural plan and security codes for the professor's next secret base." Liam pressed a microdrive into her palm. It was cool to the touch. He paused, his voice taking on a grave tone. "Stella, this was just the appetizer. The real hunt begins now." Alarms blared, tearing through the silence of the underground base. Red lights flashed maniacally against the metal walls, painting every face in a demonic glow. "Welcome, Hades and the little star of the Blackwood family." Every screen in the facility simultaneously displayed the face of a man in gold-rimmed glasses. He sat in a leather chair, fingers steepled, his smile gentle. It was the professor. Behind him, tied to a chair, was the high-level executive they had turned. His face was ashen. The professor chuckled, adjusting his glasses. "A brilliant plan. Unfortunately, the pawn you used to pass your messages was my pawn from the very beginning." A red timer appeared on the screen. 15 minutes. "In 15 minutes, this place will be your tomb," the professor said calmly. "Oh, and by the way, the bomb's primary detonator is in the power core on level B7. This gentleman, however, is in the control center on the top floor. You can choose one, or perhaps split up." He watched them like an amused spectator, savoring his final struggle. Liam and Stella exchanged a look. There was no hesitation. "I'll get the hostage," Stella said, her voice devoid of any tremor. "I'll disarm the bomb," Liam stated simply. "Be careful." Stella looked at him, the ice on her face melting for a fraction of a second. "If you die, there'll be no one left to run up my credit card." Liam's lips twitched into a smirk. "Don't worry, I haven't maxed it out yet. I'd hate to die with credit remaining." Before the words had even faded, they shot off in opposite directions, like 2 arrows released from the same bow. Stella moved like a phantom through the labyrinth corridors. Any guard who tried to stop her became another body at the feet of her golden blade. Her movements were precise, efficient, and utterly ruthless. In the top-floor control center, the professor leisurely watched Stella's rampage on the monitors. "Go," he said to the man beside him. "Play with Miss Blackwood. Don't let her interrupt me too soon." When Stella kicked open the door to the control center, the professor was calmly wiping a scalpel with an antiseptic towelette. "Miss Blackwood, your skills are even more impressive than the reports indicated," he said, his eyes appraising her like a work of art. "A pity such a perfect specimen is about to be damaged." Stella wasted no time on words. Lunging forward, her blade aimed at his throat, the professor didn't retreat. He advanced, his scalpel carving a bizarre arc through the air, perfectly parrying her attack. The tip of his blade then drew a deep, bloody line down her arm. He was a master of human anatomy, every attack aimed at nerves and joints. Stella gritted her teeth, the searing pain only making her more focused. She abandoned her plan for a quick victory and settled in for a battle of attrition. Meanwhile, on level B7, Liam faced a time bomb far more complex than he'd anticipated. A tangled mess of wires surrounded a central screen where a heart rate monitor was linked directly to the professor's vital signs. If the professor died, the bomb would detonate instantly. Judge, I need all of the professor's biometric data. 3 minutes, Liam ordered through his earpiece, his fingers already flying as he dismantled the outer casing. Time bled away. In the control center, Stella was covered in wounds. Her stamina was draining rapidly, but the professor fought like a tireless precision machine. Give up, he said, kicking her hard in the stomach and sending her sprawling. He pressed the scalpel to her throat. Your man is probably a cloud of ash by now. Stella coughed up blood, but her eyes were brighter than ever, a taunting smile on her lips. Is that so? I have a feeling he's already here. The professor froze. In that instant, an overwhelming, bone-chilling, killing intent flooded the room from behind him. Liam was there, having appeared like a ghost from hell. He had disarmed the bomb, but not without a price. His left shoulder was a mangled ruin of flesh and blood. He saw Stella lying in a pool of her own blood, and his usually calm eyes erupted with an inferno of pure rage. You hurt my star. There were no more words, only a primal, brutal fight to the death. The professor's surgical skill was laughable against Liam's hurricane of attacks. Liam abandoned all defense, trading wound for wound, life for life. The professor's arm was broken. His chest was pierced. The last thing he saw before he died was the image of Liam carefully lifting Stella, wrapping her wounds with a piece of his own shirt. The base began to shake violently. The ceiling crumbled. Liam picked up the unconscious Stella and, through the rising flames and thunderous explosions, began to walk toward the exit. He leaned close to her ear and whispered with all the strength he had left. Stella, I'm taking you home. The Spectre Syndicate's Asian branch was annihilated overnight. The news sent shockwaves through the entire underworld. No one knew who was responsible, only that the cancer that had festered for years had been ripped out by its roots by an unstoppable force. Liam had avenged his brother. Stella had protected her family's legacy. 3 months later, at a private recovery clinic, Stella leaned against her pillows, looking out the window. Liam was clumsily peeling an apple for her. The peel broke 8 times, and the apple itself was whittled down to a lumpy, misshapen nub. All right, stop. Any more, and you'll be left with a core. Stella laughed. Liam handed her the sadly looking apple with a serious expression. A technical error. I'll improve next time. Stella took a bite. It was sweet. She looked at the faint scar on Liam's wrist, a memento from when he'd taken a nearly fatal blow for her. Her heart clenched. She leaned over and gently kissed the scar. Liam's body tensed for a moment before he laced his fingers through hers, holding on tight. The day Stella was discharged, Blackwood Industries stock hit an all-time high. The company had completely absorbed the vast assets left behind by the syndicate's collapse, becoming a true global behemoth. In the underworld, a new name began to circulate, Hades's Court, which had risen from the ashes of a syndicate to establish a new order. The two of them heard the reports from an assistant in the car, and then thought no more of it. All the power in the world couldn't compare to a simple, quiet life. On a sunny afternoon, they walked hand in hand through Central Park, just like any other couple. Liam was in a plain white t-shirt and Stella wore a simple sundress. The Ice Queen replaced by a woman with gentleness in her eyes. Look, an ice cream truck. Can we get one? Stella asked, pointing like a little girl. Liam was about to nod when a group of teenagers with brightly dyed hair and slouching postures blocked their path. The leader, a kid with yellow hair, let his eyes roam disrespectfully over Stella, then jerked his chin at Liam. Hey man, you're a lucky guy. How about you let us borrow your girl for a couple of days? Another, with green hair, sneered. A scrawny dude like you can't possibly keep a woman that hot satisfied, right? The air seemed to drop 20. The smile on Liam's face hadn't faded, but his eyes had changed. They held the calm of a man looking at the dead. He was about to crack his knuckles, but Stella moved first. She let go of Liam's hand and took a single step forward, her movement a blur. There was the sharp, sickening crack of a dislocated joint and a scream like a pig being slaughtered. She had executed a perfect clean shoulder thrust, slamming the yellow-haired kid face first into the grass, where he lay twitching. The other teens froze, their legs turning to jelly. They stared at the woman who had been so gentle and beautiful a moment before, as if they were seeing a ghost. Stella dusted off her hands, turned and looped her arm back through Liam's. She looked up at him, her smile radiant and proud, the frost in her eyes melting into a warm spring. Honey, was I amazing, or what? Liam looked down at her, the cold fury in his own eyes long since replaced by pure adoration. He reached out and gently tapped the tip of her nose. Yes, my queen is the most amazing woman in the world. He paused, then leaned in close, his voice a low whisper for her ears only. We should have a baby. Stella's face flushed a brilliant shade of crimson all the way to the tips of her ears. For the first time, she looked genuinely shy. She gave him a light tap on the chest, but pressed herself even closer into his side. The sun was warm, the breeze was gentle, and in their villa that night, a new kind of fire burned so brightly it made the birds outside the window blush. End.